Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today we are doing the craziest tier list we've done on the channel to date. Why? Well, we're talking about a ton of teams. Why? Well, there's been a lot of talk recently, as well as in the past, and there's going to be in the future, about what teams the United Football League should either bring back, should expand to. And since it would be pretty fun to go back and look, we have kind of covered more modern USFL and XFL teams, but we haven't actually looked at every single major defunct team from major alt football leagues. Now, we're not going to be talking about things like, the Arena League, IFL, things like that. We're going to be talking American leagues with the World Football League, United States Football League, XFL, UFL, the 2010s version, and the AAF. That's 5 different leagues. Well, technically more when you consider the fact they got, some of them came back. So really 7 different leagues that we're going to be talking about teams for. And well, just look at this team list. We have over 60 teams to make this tier list for. Now, exactly what is this tier list? This is the tier list of teams to bring back to the United Football League. Now, the fact is, this is one of those where it's, a very tough tier list to make. Because exactly why would you bring certain teams back? Whether it be because of the city they play in, the iconicness of them, how important they are to the overall history of alt football. This is a very tough list to make. Now, the tier list base is going to be a lot simpler than usual. It's just going to be your simple S, A, B, C, D, F tier list, because I'm going to have this in the description, and you can view this in any way you want. You can use this tier list to make, ranking them from best to worst. You can rank them from, favorite logo to least favorite logo. But for this exact video, we're going to be ranking them based on should they return to the United Football League today. Now, yes, a lot of these teams are going to go in the lowest 2 tiers for obvious reasons. Whether it be overlapping with cities, overlapping with names, overall just insanely forgettable and has no real point of coming back, or a certain city they play in. It's going to be a tough one to make, but again, a lot of these teams will be in the lower tiers. So, in the end, it's going to be very skewed, with a bunch of teams in the bottom. That's not because you just can't bring them back, but it's because you shouldn't. Like, let's be real, you shouldn't have 3 teams playing in Birmingham for obvious reasons. So yes, now, overall, this is going to be mainly done by the city that they're in and how important the team is. But yes, so S tier are teams that I believe that the UFL should do their best to try and bring back. Whether it be having to get the trademark, whether it be because you already have it, get these teams back for one reason or another. C tier would naturally be the teams where they could come back, probably not, but maybe I could see an argument. Then F tier is, of course, that they just should not come back for one reason or another or have no reason to. Then A, B, and D are, what you expect. A is most likely should, B is maybe should, D is, probably not, but it wouldn't be, surprised. So that'll do it. Now, without further ado, let's get started with the Birmingham teams. Yes, all 4 Birmingham teams obviously go to the F tier because we already have a Birmingham team. So when you look at this, you do have the Americans who did win the only WFL championship, which in most cases I would put this team much higher because I'd want to have this UFL have all the former champions. But when you consider the fact that we already have a Birmingham team that's won multiple championships, you can't really argue them to come back. Then, of course, you have the Vulcans, both another team from the WFL, but then we have the Thunderbolts from the XFL and the Iron from the AAF. Again, you already have a Birmingham team. You can't really bring these all back. And naturally, just as an FYI for the sake of this is purely based on the cities these teams played in. Whether they played in one city or 2, I'm not going to, just say, oh yeah, let's bring back the Americans, put them here. We're viewing them from the same exact city they played before. So that's the first group of the tiers is, of course, the Birmingham teams. Now, staying on a similar course, we have the Houston teams, the Gamblers and the Texans. Now, the Gamblers' only shot of returning would be if they decide to rebrand the Roughnecks, which I doubt they're going to do. But, of course, the Houston Texans, not only do we already have a Houston team, but we actually have a Houston Texans now in the NFL. So neither of these 2 teams really have any real shot of returning as long as the current 8 teams stay the same. Then the next group or next team is the Wheels. Now, technically, you could bring back the Wheels if the rumors of the Panthers moving to like Ann Arbor, Spartan Stadium is true because they're the Michigan team. Then you could bring back the Wheels to Ford Field. But for obvious reasons, no. You're not going to put 2 teams in Michigan, especially not when you just left Ford Field. You're not going to wait for a few years. It's just, you already have a team in Michigan. I don't expect them to have 2 of them, so the Wheels do go into the F tier, especially since we don't even know for sure if the Panthers move. Then we have the Memphis teams, and there's actually a few of them. We have the Southmen, the Maniacs, and the Express. Again, 3 teams in Memphis that can't really come back because we already have a Memphis team, so they all go to the F tier. And then we have the San Antonio. We actually have a few here as well. We have the Wings, we have the Gunslingers, and we have the Commanders. Now, the Commanders definitely sucks. The fact is, this was a very popular team, had great attendance, was a really good team just as a team. But again, we already have a San Antonio team, so it's pretty hard to argue why we should, bring back them when you already have one. And I'm saying we shouldn't. And I've always said you shouldn't get rid of the teams you currently have. You shouldn't move them for one reason or another. So sadly, the Commanders do have to go to F tier. And then we have the Washington Federals. Of course, they play in D.C. I get what some might joke about saying, hey, you can just put them in the state of Washington. You ain't putting the Federals in Washington, the state. This is the D.C. team, but we already have the D.C. Defenders. So because of that, the Federals do have to go in the F tier. Now, that is actually all of the teams that overlap with current markets. There is actually no Arlington/Dallas and no St. Louis team from any of these previous leagues. While that might sound crazy, that's actually true. So, without further ado, let's get started with the real part of the tier list, since that now we're actually able to talk about teams that have a shot. We're going to start with the LA teams. Now, with the LA teams, you have the Extreme, Wildcats, and Express. Now, between the 3 of these, the Express, I have no shot of coming back. I just don't see it. Yes, I get they had Steve Young, but at the end of the day, they were a failure really in the USFL in terms of attendance and draw and all that. They're not really one of the famous USFL teams. They're only known because of Steve Young. This isn't like, I remember that team because they were a good team or for some reason. No, it's just because they had Steve Young. Now, with the Wildcats, I'm putting them at D. Again, I just don't see them returning, but the reason they're not in F tier is if they were to be the LA team that gets brought back, which again, it's LA. I wouldn't want a team there, but it would be because they're the more modern of the 3 teams. But the Extreme, I'm putting in the B tier. Like I said earlier, I want to have the teams that actually won championships. The Extreme won the the XFL championship. They won the original one. But the reason they're in B tier, not A or S, is because, again, it's LA. LA is a very oversaturated market, as is. And that's not even talking about minor sports. Just in pro sports, it's already super saturated. So you shouldn't add a team to LA. If you're gonna, it should be the Extreme. And I think they have a chance of returning. But again, it's LA. You have the California tax issue, you have playing in California and all that, but you amplify that by being in LA. Your attendance won't be great, so because of that, I'm putting them at B. Now, the next group, we're going to look at a couple of S-tier teams from the 2010s UFL with the Las Vegas Locomotives and the Omaha Nighthawks. Both of these should be very obvious, one of them for the sake of where they're playing and the other one for the sake of how important they are in the history of all football. The Las Vegas Locomotives, yes, the UFL played 4 seasons, but they only actually finished 3 of them. They made it to all 3 championship games and won 2 of them. So you have a 2-time champion team in the Locomotives or the Locos. They should be back. If you're trying to make an ultimate spring football or alt-pro football league, you should have a team that won 2 of 3 championships and made it to all 3. Then the Nighthawks, come on, Omaha's the place that almost everybody seems to be talking about deserving a team or should be getting one, whether it be because of the TV numbers or the potential untapped market there. So if you're going to bring a team there, should be the Nighthawks. They played in Omaha for obvious reasons. They did good attendance. Of course, if you're going to bring back 2 UFL teams, those are the 2 you bring back. You bring back the true, I guess, the Birmingham Stallions of that league, and you bring back the Omaha Nighthawks. So with that, those are a couple teams added to the S tier. And now we're going to start by talking about the Salt Lake Stallions and Orlando Renegades. These 2 teams go in the F tier for very obvious reasons. Stallions, Renegades. We already have a Stallions team and we already have a Renegades team. Salt Lake is also one of those markets where some people still suggest it, but considering how bad the Stallions drew there, I don't know about that one, Chief. But the Renegades, of course, we already have a Renegades team. So naturally, both of them do have to go to the F tier. The odds of bringing them back is very low. The only way they would be returned is if we move the Renegades or the Stallions, which I seriously doubt that's happening. So because of that, they both go to F tier. Now we're going to hit Vegas with the other 2 Vegas teams. We're going to put the Vipers at D and the Outlaws at F. Yes, I have the Locos at S, but there's that sneaking suspicion where if they're going to bring a team to Vegas, they would just bring back the Vipers. Granted, the Vipers, you also could bring them back to Tampa Bay, and that's the real reason they're at D tier. Well, I think there's other teams in Florida as a whole that should be brought back before the Vipers. They technically are one of those cities that can, or teams that can double dip, whether it be in Vegas or Tampa Bay. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them back, but I don't expect them to, so I have them at D. Now the Outlaws, again, one of those XFL teams that just can't really expect to see back. Again, I wouldn't see them back over the Vipers or the Locomotives, and so because of that, they go to F tier. Now, the next group of teams we have is a pretty big one. This is the group of New York/New Jersey teams, or that true northeastern area, right? We have a few teams we're talking about here, right? Now, the Stars do go to the F tier. Yes, they are a team that is in both Charlotte and New York, but for a team that we'll get to later, you can probably see why I have them in F. If you know spring football history, you know why I'm having them in F. So because of that, they're in the F tier. Then, of course, the New York, New Jersey Hitmen go to the F tier. The New York Sentinels go to the F tier. The Hartford Colonials do go to the C tier, though. I wouldn't be super shocked to see a team go there. It's one of those areas that a lot of people still think deserves a team. They haven't had a true, major foot or sport team really since the days of the Hartford Whalers. So seeing a team go there, I wouldn't be super against it or super shocked by it. The Guardians at B. Again, they have the benefit of being both New York and Orlando. They have a shot at returning. And then, of course, the New Jersey Generals. New Jersey Generals are the most famous alt football league team. I know people nowadays will try to say the Battlehawks. Nah. The Generals are. Whether it be Donald Trump, whether it be Herschel Walker, whether it be Doug Flutie, Brian Sipe, or many other players or people. I mean, hell, Don Shula almost coached the team. The Generals are the most famous non-NFL team that, is from America and all that. They are the most famous. I know some would say maybe the Stars are, but really the Generals are that team. They need to be in this league at some point. They need to be brought back. They were in the modern USFL. They need to be brought back, so they go to S tier. So to kind of recap all the New York, New Jersey teams, S, New Jersey Generals, B, Orlando/New York Guardians, C, the Hartford Colonials, and then F tier we have the New York/Charlotte Stars, the New York, New Jersey Hitmen, and of course the New York Sentinels. Now the next group is some of the more modern USFL teams that do need to be brought back, and that's the other three. The Maulers originally, like if you were to tell me, if I were to make this list like 2 years ago or a year ago, yeah, they wouldn't be this high. But the fact is, over the past season, with how much fan service they got, with them changing their colors, with how many people got behind them, they're a team that needs to be back. A bunch of likable players, a bunch of likable coaches, both Jaron and Ray Horton. The fact is they're a team that needs to be brought back. Whether you do have to put them in Canton or you can actually bring them to Pittsburgh, they changed their color scheme for it, putting them in S. The Breakers, for one, obviously should be in New Orleans, and they're probably the most likely team to be brought back in the UFL at this exact moment. Since everybody pretty much expects the first wave of expansion, they will be in it. But of course, if you really want to, you do have Portland or Boston to work with there. And then the Stars, I mean, come on, it's the Philadelphia Stars/Baltimore. Again, you technically have the benefit of going to Baltimore if you really need to. But the fact is, this is a team that won 2 of 3 original USFL championships. That's considered the gold standard of, non-NFL pro football in America, is the original USFL. And they were 2 of the 3 champions and made it all 3 times. Obviously, they have to be at S tier. So yes, all 4 of the modern teams that played in 2023 should all be in the S tier and should all be brought back. Now we're going to go to another couple of S tier teams. We're going to go with the San Diego Fleet and the Seattle Sea Dragons. Now, yes, another boat team. We have the Showboats, now we have the Fleet. But yes, San Diego, it's a market that I think some people are slightly overrating, acting like it'll be St. Louis. I don't think it'll be exactly St. Louis where it hits 30K, but it still is a very good market that definitely can be an over 20K market considering just how the Chargers situation ended and all that. Yes, if you're going to bring back an AAF team, it's the Fleet you bring back for obvious reasons. You're playing in San Diego. Then the Dragons, I would get rid of the C, just bring them back as the Seattle Dragons in my opinion. But the fact is the Dragons definitely need to be here. Seattle, they loved their team. The attendance got hit hard. And yes, I always talk about it. The attendance went down severely compared to the 2020 versus the 2023 XFL. But a lot of that was just horrid scheduling. Whether it be games on weekdays, games happening at the exact same time as the Kraken. It was just horrid scheduling by the XFL side. But the Dragons deserve to be in this league at some point. They need to be brought back. So them and the Fleet definitely deserve to be in the S tier. Now we're going to start by just adding a couple more teams that are for obvious reasons. Philadelphia Bell now. Of course, we have the Philadelphia Stars. You're not going to bring back the Philadelphia Bell. Yes, I get it. You can put them technically in another city. I don't see that. And then, of course, the Charlotte Hornets. Yes, I'd love a team in North Carolina. But we already have a Charlotte Hornets at this point. You know what I mean? So, of course, they go there. We have the Charlotte Hornets in the NBA, so, of course, they're not going to be brought back. Now, a couple other teams in the D tier. The Shreveport Steamer, I seriously doubt would return, but it's in one of those areas that nobody talks about, so it's one of those, like, why not? But the Hawaiians also are very similar in a sense that technically it could work let's not count for time zone for a second. Putting a team in Hawaii could work. Having a legit pro team in Hawaii could be a good draw, could be a cool thing to have. Actually, have one of the, kind of two forgotten states in the country actually, have a team there, especially with the huge growing in football. But, of course, the reason they're D tier is because, again, the massive time zone difference. It's like 2 hours later than even the California area or that whole time zone. So when you view it in that regard, you're talking about having games at weird times basically guaranteed. It would be insanely tough to have a team there. But if you're going to try and make work, I mean, hell, people still think there are rumors of, a team going to London in the NFL. So why not? But again, they're D tier. It'd have to take a bunch of logistics, and this wouldn't be for something for like well over 10 years. But it's one of those like, hey, why not? Maybe, maybe not, D tier. Now we have a few other teams to talk about with Chicago. Chicago actually has a lot. There's 4 teams to talk about here. Now with Chicago, you have the Fire, you have the Wind, you have the Blitz, and you have the Enforcers. Now 2 of these teams have issues in regards to potential trademark issues. The Chicago Wind don't, but the Fire, there's technically like the Chicago Fire FC. Then there's the Chicago Blitz in like the X League. So could they be brought back? I don't really know. And if I'm going to be honest, I'd bring back the Enforcers over them for partially that issue, but also to have some more balance in terms of certain leagues. The Chicago Enforcers, though, I'm putting in A tier. Again, they're not a team that's like iconic like the S tier teams. They have a cool logo and all that, but the fact is that if you're going to bring back a Chicago team, well, I would like to see the Blitz back. You kind of do have to deal with that issue, but of course the main reason is the fact that, you'd be adding a ton of USFL teams, and these aren't even the only ones we're going to talk about. So if you're going to bring back an old XFL team that has a decent shot of returning, I would say the Chicago Enforcers definitely have that shot. Now, of course, we're going to be talking about a couple other one-offs. The Virginia Destroyers and the Atlanta Legends. The Atlanta Legends are putting a D tier. Big city, didn't really draw that well. D tier. Very simple for that reason. They weren't the biggest draw despite being a big city, but it is still a big market. It still is Atlanta. If you're going to bring a team there, this is your only option, so D tier. Then the Destroyers, I'm putting them at B tier. I would put them higher because they are the only other champion of the UFL. I said how the Locos won 2 of 3. The one they lost was to the Destroyers. But the issue with the Destroyers is very obvious when you look at the fleet. It's another damn boat team. I mean, and it's a lot more similar to the fleet, right? Because at this point, you'd have the Showboats, the Fleet, and the Destroyers. You'd have 3 legit boat teams. If you were to bring back the Steamer, make that 4. So you kind of see why the Steamer's at 4. You kind of see why the Destroyers are at B tier. If you're going to bring back one of the 2, you bring back the Fleet because of the market. But the Destroyers, I definitely could see them back. But because of, the issue of it being, a Destroyer, which is very similar to the Fleet's logo and all that, putting it at the B tier. Now we have a couple other teams that go to the A tier, a couple old USFL teams. We have the Oklahoma/Arizona Outlaws and the Oakland Invaders. The team that has the best logo and best uniforms from the OG USFL, in my opinion, is definitely my favorite, is the Invaders. I'd love to see them back. Now, not only just talking about that from, a logo and color standpoint and all that, it's Oakland. I mean, that's another market. Yes, I know there's issues where you play. I'm not going to talk about it. At the end of the day, some of these teams wouldn't even be brought back for another 5-10 years by that point. There probably will be a stadium in all these places. But the Invaders definitely should be brought back. Oakland has been getting absolutely hammered by all the teams that played in there. The A's are gone. The Raiders are gone. You need something to fill the void. The Invaders could be a great way to do that. Then the Outlaws, simply put, Oklahoma and Arizona. Yeah, you can double dip there. Oklahoma's another area that some people do think deserves a team and all that. So because of that, I'm putting them both at A tier. I could see an argument for the Outlaws to be dropped to B tier, but at least for now I'm putting them both in A tier. The one thing with Oakland, though, is that I don't think Oakland's as dominant as a place like San Diego, and that's why the Invaders come in at A tier. Again, because I do know that they have a bit more questions about where to play and all that, but in the end, though, I'm going to put them at the A tier. Now, of course, you have another group of 3 teams talking about some Florida teams that are on the lower spectrum. We have the Jacksonville Sharks. There's an IFL team currently called the Jacksonville Sharks, instant F tier. And then, of course, because other Jacksonville teams like the Express, which I'm going to put in the D tier. Again, Express, I just doubt it, but why not? Maybe, you know. And then the Florida Blazers C tier. Simply put, when your name is Florida and you have multiple markets you can go to, you have like Miami, you have Orlando, you have Jacksonville, you have Tampa Bay. Technically speaking, if you're just called the Florida team, you can really be put anywhere there. So because of that, they go to C tier just because of how many areas they can kind of hit. So I'm putting them at C. Now, another few teams that I want to get out of the way are some other UFL teams. Now, the Florida Tuskers, I'm going to put at the B tier. The fact is, if they're going to bring back a team that's called Florida, you would bring back the Tuskers first because they lost the first 2 UFL championships to the Locomotives. The Sacramento Mountain Lions, I'm putting in C. Sacramento's one of those areas that not a ton of people talk about, but it's another one of those, you know, maybe why not kind of deals. So C tiers, where just like the Colonials, it's one of those why not potentials, you know. And then, of course, we're going to have the California Redwoods go to the F tier. There is a PLL team, Premier League Lacrosse, or Premier Lacrosse League, that already has that same name, so F tier, obviously. Now, in terms of some other teams, we have the Portland Thunder, Portland Storm, and the Southern California Sun. I'm going to put the Thunder and Storm in the D tier. Again, the Breakers technically can move to Portland. I doubt they will. If you're going to put a team in Portland, it's one of those debatable markets, but the fact is that between the two of them, if you're all going to bring them, it has to be one of those two most likely, so they're both going to be in D tier. Not one of them really more iconic than the other one. The Southern California Sun go to C tier for the same reason that, the Florida Blazers do. Southern California, there's a lot of markets in Southern California, so there's a lot of areas the team could technically go to, so because of that, C tier. Now, to get rid of another group of 4 USFL teams, we're going to have the Jacksonville Bulls at A tier, the Denver Gold at B, the Tampa Bay Bandits at C tier, and the Arizona Wranglers at D. The Arizona Wranglers have the issue of the Northern Arizona Wranglers that exist, so there could be some issues there. But when you talk about the Bandits, I'm putting them at C. I get it. There's a lot of people who do want the Bandits back in the modern era. But with all the other Florida teams you have available to you, I'm sorry, I'd rather bring back the Jacksonville Bulls. That was a team that, you don't have any of the bad stigma of more recently where the Bandits got, kicked out of the USFL in favor of the Memphis Showboats. The Jacksonville Bulls were a huge drawback in, the 80s. And in terms of a Jacksonville team, the Bulls would be a really solid one to bring back. And then the Gold, I'm putting them at B tier. Nobody ever talks about Denver, but it's one of those areas where you definitely could bring a team to. And so if you're gonna, of course, the Gold are your option. So they go to B tier. Now we're going to get a couple of the AAF teams out of here. The Orlando Apollos go to C tier and the Arizona Hotshots at D tier. The Arizona Hotshots, for the same reason, really, the Wranglers. Could go put a team in Arizona. They didn't really draw well at all, but, why not? The Orlando Apollos had a really good attendance in the XFL, and the reason they go to C tier and not like B tier is because of the Guardians. If the Guardians were to be brought back to New York, then the Apollos definitely would move up to like the B or A tier. But because of the Guardians' issues, you're going to have to put the Apollos at C tier. And then finally, we have the last 2 XFL teams to talk about with the Rage and Demons, which both go to the F tier. San Fran, nobody talks about San Fran. It's one of those, it's like, yes, it's a lesser evil than LA, but it still has a lot of teams there. Well, not a lot, but still has a decent amount. But overall, I just wouldn't imagine a team going to San Fran. And then the Rage, there's just a lot of other Orlando teams that would be brought back before them, the Apollos and Guardians, obviously. So because of that, they go to the F tier. And so that'll do it. This is the tier list. The tier list ends up being, for S tier, the Locos, Nighthawks, Generals, Stars, Breakers, Maulers, Fleet, and Sea Dragons. The A tier is the Enforcers, Outlaws, Invaders, and Bulls. Then the B tier, you've got the Extreme, you've got the Guardians, you've got the Destroyers, the Tuskers, and the Gold. C tier, the Colonials, the Blazers, the Mountain Lions, Sun, Bandits, and Apollos. And then you get to the D tier where you have, the Wildcats, the Vipers, the Hawaiians, the Steamer, the Blitz, Legends, Express, Storm, Thunder, Wranglers, Hotshots. And then F, you have all the other teams, just a huge bunch of them. And so with all that, that's my tier list. Again, I have a tier list. I have this exact tier list in the description below if you want to make a tier list for a different reason or for the same reason. Let me know down below what you think about this tier list. Are there certain teams you'd move up higher or lower? Are there certain teams you don't think should return that I have returning, or vice versa? And as always, guys, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. This was a tough video to make, considering the fact that, again, I had to get, like 63 different teams, find some of these images, make the whole tier list was a nightmare. I couldn't imagine doing it one by one. And so subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell to be notified as soon as I upload any videos. If you want to help the channel and support it, become a channel member for as low as 99 cents a month. And as always, guys, have a great night.